All right, everybody, good evening. Patrolman Nick Fazio with the Plainsboro Police Department. Welcome to our educational seminar number 2. This month's educational seminar is going to be on frauds and scams. It's something that's a big topic. It's something that we deal with a lot in Plainsboro Township. We do have a special guest presenter here with us tonight as well. Along with that, we have Corporal Joe Breda with us and Detective Will Atkinson, who are also going to speak about problems impacting Plainsboro Township. Right now, I'm going to send it over to Sergeant Blanchard. I apologize, we got a little bit of a late start, so we're going to rush this introduction a bit and get our presentation started. I'm going to send it to Sergeant Blanchard right now for an introduction.
Hello, everyone, and we'd like to welcome a very special guest tonight. She's going to be discussing the global aspects of frauds and scams, things that are occurring at a frequent pace every day to everybody throughout the world, and she's going to give us her global perspective. So without further ado, Nicole Steady.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nicole Setti. I am a Senior Vice President at Kroll, which is a private investigations and cybersecurity incident response firm. I am on Kroll's cyber threat intelligence team, which means I look at strategic cyber trends as they're happening. We receive upwards of 100 to 200 intakes each month with different kinds of hacking incidents happening to big companies, small companies, municipalities, etc. And I help to respond to those cyber events, many of which involve fraud and all types of scams. So I've been at Kroll for about 2 years. Prior to that, I worked for the FBI. I was a cyber intelligence analyst with the FBI for about 10 years. When I was there, I worked primarily on national security cyber intrusions, so hacking incidents from nation-state actors and that type of investigation. Before that, I worked for Army, for the Department of Defense. I was an intelligence specialist with Army Communications Electronics Command. So I've had about 15 years in government looking at criminal and national security cyber intrusions, and now really working with the private sector to really look at current events, current cyber attacks as they're unfolding, and really trying to watch trends and help inform both the clients and also our practitioners at Kroll about what sort of the next fraud or cyber event type attacks will be coming down the pipe. And so tonight I'm here to talk to you about cyber trends. I'm going to be discussing cyber trends in 2020, so things that have happened over the last year since the beginning of COVID. We'll be talking a little bit about the fraud trends such as unemployment fraud that happened in the last year, as well as things like social security fraud, ransomware, different types of scams such as like non-delivery of goods. So we'll talk about these scams, how they happen, how criminals carry out these schemes, and then we'll talk a little bit about ways you can prevent these things from happening, and then how you can recover and respond to events such as these. So with that, I'm going to share some slides at this point, and we'll get started with the presentation here. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm going to start off by talking about cybercrime trends. So we'll talk a little bit about the unemployment fraud that really hit the United States pretty hard this year in 2020 and into 2021 as well. And then we'll talk about identity theft and how it happens, how threat actors, criminals can get your data, and how they can use that data maliciously to carry out different types of cyber fraud and different scams. And then we'll talk a little bit about like a variety of scams that are out there for awareness purposes for you to kind of be on the lookout for. And we'll close by just talking about how to report some of these incidents, the different agencies that you can report fraud to, and then also just kind of how to recover if an incident like this happens to you or your family or loved ones. So, just kind of start off big picture. In, the past year, going back, let's turn back the dial to March of 2020. COVID was sort of just, hitting the scene. There was a lot of unemployment assistance rolling out in the form of the CARES Act by the federal government. We saw state-based programs just kind of ballooning and spinning up online unemployment assistance to help people, get their unemployment benefits. Because these online programs were spun up so quickly by the states, they were somewhat vulnerable to cyber attack and cyber fraud. And so what we saw throughout 2020, not just with unemployment fraud, but with just kind of online fraud in general, we saw a drastic increase from the stats from 2019 to the stats for 2020. So for 2020, according to the FBI's organization IC3, there was like a 69% increase in cyber complaints. Reporting things like phishing incidents, business email compromise scams, these different types of unemployment frauds and social security fraud scams we've been talking about. So like a real increase in the past year, partly due to COVID and everyone sort of being remote, working remotely and using computers and being online a lot more. And then partly due to this assistance fraud that we saw happening with unemployment insurance. So to kind of hone in a little bit on the unemployment piece, we saw states such as like Washington State spinning up their online unemployment assistance program. And what would happen is criminals would get a hold of some small bit of personally identifiable information, or PII, for say like a Washington State resident. And with this PII that they obtained either through social engineering, by tricking people into giving that information up via an email, or by buying that information for sale on the dark web, they could take that PII and go to the unemployment website, and basically they were filing false claims. And so they would use a fake email paired with real, Washington State information of an individual, and they would file these claims and then siphon the data out to like cash cards. And this was all happening so fast that the programs were getting rolled out really quickly. The cyber actors, as usual, were sort of a step ahead and finding out the flaws in the system and cashing out a lot of unemployment claims for people who may have been out there working and were really unawares. And so what would happen is an employer would get contacted by a state agency saying that like 6 or 7 employees had filed unemployment claims, and meanwhile these people were working. And so we were starting to see these trends where employers were being notified, individuals were receiving letters or statements that they had filed unemployment claims when really they hadn't. And so some warning signs of this type of fraud is obviously just like the notifications you might receive in the mail. So it's just something to look out for. If you get a notification that you filed unemployment claims, if you get a notification, say, that from your employer that you've done this, it's a sign that you could have been involved in some of these schemes that were really quite popular this past year. Some other things to look out for are sort of like unsolicited, inquiries, phone calls, things like that, transactions on your bank or credit cards. It's just important to kind of keep an eye out for anything involving benefits, especially with the rollout of COVID and how a lot of these assistance programs have been changing their method of delivery. So another example similar to this is Social Security fraud. The Social Security Administration has recently rolled out a new My Social Security portal, relatively new. So what they're doing is they're kind of advertising the fact that you can create an online portal to get your Social Security statement or get a new Social Security card, which is great. And that's really convenient for those of us who don't like to deal, with paper statements. But I found in my career as a cybersecurity analyst that when things are made more convenient or put online to be more convenient, it also makes it easier for cyber criminals to access. So convenience does not necessarily equal better security. It often has an inverse, relationship. The more convenient and accessible something is, the less secure it tends to be. And so that was the case with this Social Security portal for one individual. She received a statement in the mail that it said, "Thank you for creating a My Social Security portal online." And she hadn't done that. Shortly thereafter, she received a letter that she had confirming her change of address for her Social Security information, and she hadn't done that either. So I worked with her. We just kind of course, she found this out on a Friday evening, which is kind of always when this stuff happens. We worked through the weekend to try and, we went to the FTC.gov website. we went to identitytheft.gov, and we tried to work through what we could through the weekend. She contacted her banks, et cetera. And on Monday morning, she had to go in person to the Social Security Administration, and lo and behold, like there had been an account set up in her name. In this case, the criminal really only needed her Social Security number, which is, unfortunately, a lot of people's information is available on the dark web, through other nefarious means, and her mailing address to kind of get started with this portal. And then they were able to start getting in there. You can even change direct deposit information. So again, just like the unemployment fraud, this is something to just be aware of, right? Like check your statements when they come in the mail. Don't just kind of throw them, in a box or in a file. Keep an eye out for any sort of suspicious behavior, happening in your name or letters coming to your house. In this person's case, she was able to get that portal account closed. They put a pin on her account so this fraud couldn't happen again. And lucky enough for her, none of her Social Security disbursements went to this criminal who was trying to carry out this fraud. But just a couple examples there of some fraud we've been seeing, and also kind of trends we've been seeing this year in terms of the unemployment fraud. So how did these attackers, obtain this woman's information, right? In my current job, we do a lot of research on the deep and dark web. It kind of can be a confusing thing for those of you who maybe just have heard about it, but essentially the surface web is sort of everything you can see when you're in a search engine like Google. You can search it, it's there, it's available to most people. The deep and dark web is a subset of information that is not necessarily available through your typical search engines. So you need kind of specialized software, something like Tor that you install on your machine. And then there's like a subset. You can think of it as an iceberg, with the tip of the iceberg being the surface web, and then the rest of the iceberg under the water being the deep web. And then sort of a subset under there of nefarious activity being the dark web. So on the deep and dark web, criminals can sell PII, personal identifiable information, things called fulls, which is like a full package of personal information, including maybe your Social Security number, your address, your phone number. This is a very common thing, and they're sold in bulk. So we see, hundreds of thousands of packages like this out there on the dark web available for sale. The other thing we see is, in addition to selling this PII of individuals or Social Security numbers, we see individuals on the dark web actually selling scams or selling, hey, I have a method. They sell methods of fraud. And so one method might be, this is how you scam somebody out of a Social Security portal or create a portal in their name. And they'll sell these little sort of methods to people to help facilitate the fraud for others. So a very typical way that criminals can steal your personal information to set up accounts in your name is through what's called a phishing email or a spear phishing email. This is sort of it's basically just a trick email that is sent to you by a criminal, and they're trying to get you to trick you into either giving them information about yourself or to maybe click on a link, which can then download malware on your computer that can steal information about you. So this is kind of one of the most common ways we see in the cyber realm of individuals stealing your personal information, which can then be used to facilitate these frauds and scams that we're talking about. In the case of the unemployment fraud we were just talking about earlier, they could use that personal information they steal via phishing to then file claims in your name. At that point, once they file the claim, they can sometimes cash the information out to like green dot cards or cash cards, or sometimes they'll even file the claim in your name. It will go to your account, and then they'll trick you somehow into forwarding that money back to them in some way. So this is kind of the life cycle of how threat actors and criminals facilitate the fraud that we're talking about. So we talked about a couple examples of typical fraud we've seen out there. I have up here on the screen some of the most common cyber crime types that were collected by the FBI's IC3 organization in 2020. And so these are some of the top kind of scams and schemes you want to be aware of. So you see at the top there phishing, which I just talked about. That's the concept of an individual trying to send an email to you to steal your data or get you to download a really malicious piece of malware or some file that could steal information from your computer. The next one there is non-payment and non-delivery. So this has become more common. The scam of non-delivery of goods has become more common as we're all getting online, we're shopping online, And especially as we're seeing more and more advertisements, say like in our Instagram feeds or in our Facebook feeds, where we're sort of complacent. You get into a complacent sort of state of mind where you're scrolling and scrolling, and then, oh, lo and behold, you see that perfect favorite widget you've been wanting and asking and looking for. And it comes up in your feed, and it's really inexpensive, and it's so tempting to click on it. Oftentimes people are clicking on these things, they're paying with PayPal, and then it's never delivered. So this is your typical non-delivery of goods. It's a scam or a scheme geared toward you, advertised toward you, but the item is not delivered. So with that, this is a pretty classic scam. I always recommend that people read the reviews first. Wherever you're shopping, make sure you read the reviews. If you're in like an off-brand website shopping, go take that website and go pop it into Google and see if you can find it anywhere else. See if you can find confirmed purchases from this website anywhere else. Try and find reviews from people who've said that that's a reputable seller, whatever website it is that you're buying from. But even, beware even of big box stores. They sometimes will funnel in sales from other smaller sellers or sort of like sub-vendors. So you kind of have to always be aware who you're buying from and read those reviews before you pay. Along those lines, if something like that happens to you, we all fall prey to it. I've actually done it before. I've clicked on like, thank you, I'm being honest. Cybersecurity analyst for 15 years. I tried to buy a pair of shoes. It was a scam. I paid too fast. I paid through PayPal. And like a second later, I thought, I didn't read the reviews. And my heart said, I went to the reviews and it just was like scam, and Instagram, scam, 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 scam. So read the reviews. If something like this happens to you and you're in a situation where you've lost some money and maybe you're not necessarily going to file a police report or go to the FBI or go to over the police station, you can still report this activity to ic3.gov. IC3 is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It is run in conjunction by the FBI, and it's basically a clearinghouse for all types of fraud information. So if you have this type of fraud that's happened to you, you really want to report it, you can go to ic3.gov and any sort of details you have about the event that happened, whether it's a scam email address or a scam business or website, you can report that in. And when the FBI gets enough sort of dots there, if they collect enough pieces of information, that can kind of raise the threshold to open a case on whatever nefarious actor that might be. So that's a great option for if you've experienced fraud. That's ic3.gov. Move on here. So, how do you prevent this? And, as we were saying, like no one's really immune to this type of cyber fraud we're talking about. It very much plays into your human nature. It plays into sort of our desire to sort of, buy things or be with people or to trust people. But one of the main things that you can do to prevent, a lot of cybercrime is verifying, the sender of an email or verifying the site on which, which you're visiting. So the email's a big one, right? Like when you get an email that maybe has a sense of urgency to it, like maybe it's your cell phone. Your cell phone just ran out of space. Oh my gosh, all your pictures are going to be deleted. Click here to expand, the space on your phone. You want to make sure that is from, Apple or it is from, your provider from Google. Don't let the sense of urgency tempt you into clicking a link that might, be nefarious. So one way of verifying the sender is to just, obviously you can look at the drop down to see the email from which it was sent. However, that can sometimes be spoofed. One thing to look out for is typos. We've seen criminals getting better and better at the use of swapping out letters to look like other letters. So for instance, you can use like an R and an N to look like an M. So they might try and spoof an email or a website with an M in it, like Amazon, by putting an R next to an N. This is called typo squatting. This is a way that a lot of those spear phishing emails come in and they look legitimate. They look like they're from a legitimate sender, but they've actually spoofed the email address to make it look like it's something it's not. So use caution in any online communications. Verify the sender of the email as best as you can. If there's a link that the sender wants you to click on, hover over the link. You can hover over it with your mouse. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the URL, the place to which that link will take you. And you can kind of do a little sleuthing and look at that. If it's saying, if you're hovering over something from Amazon that purports to be taking you to the Amazon website, if you hover over it, you should see Amazon.com somewhere in that URL at the bottom. If it's a bunch of alphanumerical, 17 alphanumerical, letters and numbers that looks a little suspicious, don't click on the link. If the email is purporting to be from someone you know, but the domain of the sender looks a little different, like, oh, I thought Sergeant Blanchard had a Gmail account, but I got an email from him and it's from a Hotmail account. So that's like, when those flags start getting raised, pick up the phone. And I've done that before. I've actually picked, did you just send me an email? And just kind of verify the sender. Be wary of attachments. Please don't go opening up attachments from unsolicited senders of emails. It's really nothing good can come of it. Really be diligent about what you're opening on your computer to make sure it doesn't have malware or some sort of information stealer in it that can steal your data. So same thing, just kind of verify. For instance, after this meeting, say I receive an email from, Sergeant Blanchard saying, oh, here's the video link from the meeting. I want to make sure, is it the email? Is it the email I know? Is it part of the ongoing email chain I have with Sergeant Blanchard? Does the link look legitimate? You should check all those things out, because criminals are getting better and better at inserting themselves into our lives and conversations. And then lastly, question offers that look too good to be true. When I clicked and tried to buy those shoes on Instagram, they were pretty inexpensive and they were really nice. Like, it was probably not for real. And I should have known that. Like, so don't, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So kind of let your, that sixth sense kick in. When it seems a little off, then that's probably a sign that you could be getting pulled into, some type of fraud. Oh, and then last one here. On the bottom right there, I just wanted to point this one out as well. It says rely on trusted sources of information. So, stick to the sites that you are legitimate and that are trusted. And this comes up also with this past year, we saw a lot of COVID-related phishing emails. So these were those malicious emails that were trying to get people to click on a link to download malware or like a computer virus. And so many of them were had COVID information, like, oh, here's a COVID heat map to see where COVID has spread in the world. Don't open that email. Don't click on that link. Just go to the CDC map or go to your state, health department map. Go to those locations that are legitimate. So really try and rely on trusted sources rather than kind of going outside of your comfort zone. Okay, so getting kind of close here to wrapping up. So tips for responding to cybercrime. If something like this does happen to you, like the Social Security event that I mentioned with the individual earlier in the briefing, right? So she receives this letter that the Social Security account was opened, on her behalf, reported to the appropriate agency. So in her case, she went to the Social Security Administration. When you can, going there in person is a great idea. Getting there in person as soon as you can to report the fraud is one of the best things you can do. Keep a record of with whom you spoke and when. You need to kind of file everything down. And then you want to, at that point, report other things like online to whatever applicable agencies there are. And then you want to get over to the FTC's page, and they have an identitytheft.gov page. This is a great resource. So if you go to ftc.gov, that's the Federal Trade Commission, it will bring you there, but you can go directly there by going to identitytheft.gov. This is a great resource for, when you're in that time of need, when the fraud just happened, when you're panicking, like, oh my goodness, did I just transfer money to a criminal? Or, oh my goodness, did someone just empty out, my savings account? If you think fraud has happened, report it to the appropriate agency and then get to identitytheft.gov. And it's a great resource for walking you through the steps of reporting the fraud and also recovering from it. So they'll offer you things like fraud alerts. They'll help you to put a freeze on your credit. You can kind of learn about, running your credit report. There's all this guidance on there that's really valuable. And it also will make sure that you've reported it to the appropriate agencies so that you can kind of stop identity theft before it kind of runs away with your identity and your resources. At this point, I guess I'll stop and turn it over to the rest of the team here to talk a little bit more about some local incidents.
So yeah, we're going to be turning it over to our local officers here in Plainsboro, Corporal Breda and Detective Atkinson.
You might be muted, Sarge. Hang on one second. Yeah, give me one.
Thanks to Nicole for providing a great global perspective, and also please listen to her advice and report these incidents because to the proper authorities or to those websites she provided that you'll be able to review in the PowerPoint presentation. This way, the FBI can do tracking situations with them, and hopefully we can get this stopped. A lot of these times they're international, correct? Individuals who are international, operating internationally and/or domestically. So hopefully you can make sure you report this and also to your local agencies. So without further hesitation, I turn it over to Corporal Breda.
Okay, can you hear me now? Oh, everyone else is muted. Okay. I am Corporal Breda. Thank you, Nicole, very much. That was very informative. So I'm a corporal in the patrol division, and either me or somebody in the patrol division will be the face of your initial fraud or ID theft invest, and we'll help you get pointed in the right direction. Even if it was like an attempted crime, we can still take a police report, and the more of these that we collect, the more we can often stop them before someone does become a victim, which I'll get into a little more specifically shortly. Now, what do I do if I become a victim of a fraud or scam? Well, that's a great question. First, you're going to have to report it to whichever jurisdiction that the crime occurred. Say the crime occurred in Plainsboro, you can either report it online or you can report it in person. And then oftentimes someone can't get to the police station, we can come to the house. But we don't take reports over the phone or on our social media pages. Sometimes people report it to us, but we direct them to the main line. If you do choose to go online, I'd like to send you to Plainsboro Township website, plainsboronj.com. Then scroll down to file a police report. And the Citizens Online Reporting System, also known as Cop Logic, that's going to pop up. From there, it's self-explanatory. Or you can call our dispatcher, and an officer can meet you in the lobby, take the report from there. And if there's any other information that you have, we can handle it in the lobby. That's where most of it, because sometimes people have packets of information or whatnot. So what information would you need? Another good question. Well, we would first ask the basics, like who, what, where, when, why, and any other type of information. See if you checked with your financial institutions, or your banks, all your other accounts. If you have not reported this to your bank, you probably want to do that so they can put a hold on your account, close out your account, or send you a new card. Once we get the gist of what's going on with your situation, we can provide you with the case number. We'll make sure you have all the information. We'll make sure we have all the information that we need. We'll scan in anything that you provide to us, or if you have any screenshots, that'll be easier for our detectives to get on it and do the investigation. Well, we'll suggest things such as changing all your passwords, maybe subscribe to identity theft protection services, and always monitor your accounts. You should do that regularly anyway. Sometimes from the road or the patrol division, we're able to begin the initial follow-up. So most of the time your report will be, once it's done with the initial investigation, it'll be sent to a supervisor for approval. Then will be forwarded to the Detective Bureau to begin the investigation process. So sometimes these incidents are not able to be solved, but sometimes they are. But I assure you, we would love to solve every single crime that's reported to us, and sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, unfortunately. One example is there's an incident here in Plains where I investigated. It was basically somebody taking, somebody got basic pedigree information from the victim, started writing it down on a notebook. From there, they would call all the victim's accounts, pretend to be the victim, and speak to an agent and write down the information as she goes. She would get enough information to open up a credit card in the victim's name. Once the credit card was shipped, she would go buy a bunch of gift cards. Once the credit card company figured it out, it was too late. They closed the account. This happened to about 15 people, totaling about $65,000 or so. Then the FBI contacted us and said, hey, they were interested. So we started working the case, and luckily we were able to intercept the credit card as it was being delivered to her. She got greedy, and we were able to find out who it was. So we ultimately arrested her. So something like that, a good way to try to prevent that would be all your packages you get from Amazon or anywhere else, rip your name off, your name and address, rip that off each sticker. It's a pain in the butt, but at the end of the day, it's going to save you a headache in the long run. Also, to all your junk mail, we get tons of that. Invest in a shredder. Just make a pile, put it in a bag and then go on a shred it all at once. That's another good way to make sure your information isn't out there. Anytime we're aware of like scams going on, or any other trends like locally or anything like that, we try to alert the public and post it to our social media. Which brings me to another recent incident where the scammer didn't get too far. We received reports of an individual going door to door asking, saying that he lives a few houses down and his vehicle broke down. He needs money for a tow truck, blah, blah, blah. Once we started receiving all these reports, we were able to get pictures from and videos from Ring cameras, stuff like that. We sent out the information to our social media, which then led to Detective Atkinson and I to get involved. Detective Atkinson specifically was able to get to meet this guy personally, and I'll at this point I'm going to turn it over to him to allow him to explain further.
Thank you very much, Corporal Breda. Like you said, I'm Detective Will Atkinson. So in reference to the case that he was mentioning, there was this gentleman that was going door to door, asking people for money. And as a result of the Facebook post made, our social media team does a great job with getting this kind of information out to the public and the residents of our town. So I believe as a result of this social media post that once the victim, the last victim that we did have, kind of met this gentleman knocked on his door, did the whole charade of asking for money, saying he was a neighbor, immediately recognized that he wasn't a neighbor. They immediately called us, and that's really key, and definitely in situations like this one, where the old cliche, if you see something, say something, and the earlier you report it, the easier it is for us to kind of get ahead of that investigation and catching the person, which in this case we did. So the victim called us pretty much immediately, was in close proximity to our police station, and we were able to catch the scammer in the location. As part of proving that he was responsible for it, we had to temporarily detain him, bring him back to our police headquarters, at which point I personally took a statement from the victim, which was audio recorded, and then I took a interview with the defendant, in which he admitted to committing the scams. So that was pretty much the long story short on that case. Another part of our detective bureau, what we do a lot of in ID theft and scam cases, is issuing and serving subpoenas. So to give layman's terms for a subpoena, it's essentially just a court order that's issued by the county prosecutor. which pretty much mandates that companies provide us with any and all information that we request that's pertinent to the case that we are investigating. So the basic process for the subpoena is once we obtain any information that we do need, so if it's an ID theft, if somebody has access to someone's bank account, and there's a transfer of funds from one bank account to another, once we have all that information, we would have to contact our zone assistant prosecutor, relay any information that we do have about the case, account numbers, stuff like that, any suspects that we may have. The zone prosecutor then determines whether we do have or do not have enough to go on to issue a subpoena. So if they do give the approval, the subpoena does get served over to the zone assistant prosecutor to approve. That does then get served back to us, at which point we do serve it to the individual company that we're trying to get information from, which could be, you know, a bank, Verizon, you know, cable company, anything like that. So these processes do take a little bit of time, which if anybody in this room has had to deal with this process, you know, we hopefully have told you that it could take weeks, months, just given the time frame of everything. So it does take a while, but, you know, just rest assured we are doing everything that we can. Like Corporal Breda said, we do want to solve every case that does get turned over to us, but, you know, sometimes we're not so lucky and the process does take a while. So that's pretty much the gist of what the Detective Bureau does in regards to ID theft and scams.
All right, thank you, Corporal Breda and Detective Atkinson. That was certainly a wealth of information from the Plainsboro side of things. Real quick, while I have you guys here, we did have a question come in of the police department. It's pretty generic. It just says, how does online reporting system get followed up on? I think you guys did touch on that, a lot of it. I think I could just jump in and just say that once it's reported, it gets forwarded to our detective bureau for review. At that point, once the detective reviews it, it'll be something that can be handled online, or you may be contacted by somebody from our agency. We did receive 2 additional questions of our guest presenter here tonight. So I do want to get those questions answered before we wrap up tonight. I know it's about 7:15 right now. We don't want to keep you guys here all night. So we're going to jump into those questions. If anything else that we haven't answered comes up, please let me know sooner than later. And if not, you guys could also link up with us on the VIP Facebook group and we can get the questions answered later on if you think of it later. At this point, let me just get back to our questions up here. And I'm going to get the spotlight up here so you can see all of us. All right. Nicole, one of the questions that we had come in was, can malware come via text message links as well as through email links?
That's a great question. And some of you may have, some of you, may have seen some of these really suspicious looking text messages coming to your phone. Please just like swipe and delete. Malware can come that way. There, especially over the last 3 to 5 years, criminals have been targeting Android systems and particularly a lot more often. So it used to be the case that phone-based malware was somewhat more rare than computer-based malware, but criminals are definitely catching up to the fact that they can distribute malware via SMS in particular. And just in the same way that you would click on a phishing link and download malware to your computer, that same thing can happen via delivery to your phone. So, essentially the phones we have now in our pockets are just small computing systems. You follow all those same sort of preventative rules and tips that we talked about when you're reading email on your computer. That same information should apply to you when you're opening up text messages or reviewing messages on your phone.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. The second question that came in is kind of the what if this happens, what should I do? I know you'd given us some really good internet links that I did post out to the group while this was going on. But the specific question was, if I click on one of these links that downloads malware, is there any way to get it off of my computer? And generically, what should I do next?
Sure. So, you're going to want to run antivirus. That's like a first great step. There are free antivirus programs out there like AVG, which you can download for free. And a lot of these free antivirus programs are, quite reputable, and they work, very well. So you'll want to, if that does happen to you and you think you downloaded malware, yes, like run antivirus. That's like one of the best steps you can take. You can kind of go the next step and maybe reformat, if that's something that you can do with your laptop that you have. I've done that in the past, where if I feel that I might have downloaded something, or if something's being really glitchy, I might just reformat the computer, just whole hog. So I think that the antivirus is important. That's something you should be running routinely anyway. It's something like we're not all great at. Install those patches, run your antivirus. And then one other thing I wanted to follow up on was Corporal Breda mentioned being careful and, cutting up that junk mail, not letting your personal information get out there, cutting up those package labels. Like a cyber version of that is being really careful when you're registering for all of these websites out there, or all of these different apps, right? We have to always put our information out there and register for all of these different websites, no matter where we go, or, if you're opening up a credit card. What I like to do is, when I'm registering, I often will just use my initials. So I'll just use, NS for my first name and last name. I also keep a separate email for junk sort of signups. It is my sign up junk email. That is the email I use whenever I'm I have to sign up for an app or a new, account for something. And then that'll be the email that all of your sort of confirmation email account setups go to. That shouldn't really be the same email as your correspondence email that you speak and do your important business with. So kind of keep those separate. And then the same way you're cutting up your important papers, you want to sort of have that same cyber hygiene with your online profiles as well. So just try and keep that in mind. And then again, like if you find that you were in a data breach, or you were in, you had some information out there that was exposed in one of these data breaches we hear about, reset your password. And don't just reset it for whatever, system was breached. Like if you're on LinkedIn and you hear, oh my gosh, there was a LinkedIn breach and my information and password was out there, reset all your passwords that use that. Like you've probably reused that password, so it's a good idea to go out there and kind of reset everything. So I just kind of wanted to follow up, because Corporal Breda had a great point about how criminals are out there looking for personal information, and it's kind of the same. There's an equivalent to that in the sort of online realm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For an outro. All right, at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to Sergeant Blanchard. This is going to wrap up our meeting, and he's going to take us out from here.
Ready?
You're good.
Well, Nicole, I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone for giving this excellent presentation. In this day and age of everybody being on their phones and their laptops perpetually, buying things, working from home, even now everyone home doing online schooling, the idea that individuals can get into your systems and really affect your credit scores, steal your social security numbers. It's very important that people are armed with the best information they have to defend themselves against this criminal activity. And we'd like to thank you for your service, not only in the FBI, in the military, and now in the private sector, defending us against this very, sometimes criminal activity that makes you feel helpless, that you really can't do anything. So we really appreciate your efforts on all fronts. And again, thank you for coming here tonight and providing us with this wonderful information. We really do appreciate it in your time. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I was happy to be here.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, that's going to wrap up our meeting for tonight. I don't see any more questions coming in. We do have another educational seminar scheduled for next month. I'm going to post all of the details for that in the Plainsboro VIP Facebook group. As far as tonight's meeting, you guys are going to be able to rewatch everything. We did create a YouTube channel in the meantime, simple to find. If you search for Plainsboro Virtual Interactive Policing on YouTube, it will pop right up. You can also find a link to it in the Plainsboro VIP Facebook group. So all of this information will be out there for you. Like I said before, if you have any additional questions after this meeting is concluded, please reach out to me in one of the posts on the VIP group. We'll be able to get an answer for you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for staying for as long as you did, and I hope you guys have a great night. Bye.